When someone disappears without a trace, the explanations are usually simple. These stories aren't. Story 1. The dusty file lay open on my desk, the fluorescent lights of the precinct glinting off the faded photograph. Sarah Jenkins, 23, vanished from her apartment 3 weeks ago. No forced entry, no struggle, just an empty space where a vibrant young woman used to be. It was the third case like this in as many months. My name is Detective Miles Corbin. I've seen my share of the dark corners of this city, but these disappearances, they felt different. Not the usual runaway teens or drug-related deaths. These were ordinary people, swallowed by the mundane, leaving behind only the unsettling silence of their absence. The first was an elderly man, Mr. Henderson, who disappeared from his garden. His wife found his trowel lying next to a perfectly pruned rose bush, as if he'd simply stepped away for a moment. Then came the young mother, Emily Carter, gone from her kitchen while her baby slept soundly in the next room. Utensils were still drying on the rack, a half-eaten apple on the counter. Now Sarah. Her apartment was eerily tidy. A book lay face down on her nightstand, a bookmark nestled between pages. Her keys and wallet were on the hall table. It was as if she'd dissolved into thin air. I'd spent weeks chasing shadows, interviewing neighbors who saw nothing, friends who knew nothing, families consumed by grief and confusion. The city, usually a cacophony of sirens and shouting, felt unnervingly quiet when I drove through the areas these people had last been seen. Tonight, the silence was particularly heavy. Rain lashed against my office window, each drop sounding like a tap on glass, an insistent, hollow knock. I traced the timeline again, searching for a pattern, a loose thread. It was futile. They were random, isolated. Yet the chilling uniformity of their departures gnawed at me. I stood and walked to the window, peering out at the slick, deserted street. The streetlights painted long, distorted shadows, and for a moment, I imagined them stretching, twisting, reaching. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. It was just the rain, the late hour, the weight of these unsolved mysteries. Then, a flicker. In the alley across the street, a figure stood, cloaked in the darkness. It was too still, too motionless to be a person catching shelter from the rain. As I watched, it seemed to lean into the shadows, not like someone hiding, but like someone becoming part of them. My breath hitched. It was gone as quickly as I'd noticed it, leaving only the drumming rain and the suffocating quiet. My heart thudded against my ribs. It was nothing, I told myself. My mind playing tricks. But that feeling, that profound wrongness, it was the same feeling I'd had at each of their empty homes. A feeling that something had reached out from the edges of existence and simply taken them. And tonight, I felt it closer than ever before. The darkness outside my window seemed to pulse, and I had the terrifying thought that it wasn't just the absence of light, but something far more. Hungry. Story 2. The basement archive smelled of stale dread and mildew. A paper mausoleum where the city's unresolved grief was filed neatly into metal cabinets. I was assigned to review the Black Creek cold cases. 8 individuals who vanished from the same 2-mile radius over the span of 3 decades. My job was to find the crack in the foundation, the overlooked detail that unified the ghosts. I started working exclusively after midnight. It felt appropriate. The living world had given up on these files. Their secrets only stirred when the rest of the building was asleep. The first few files were disorganized tragedies. Hikers, a late shift worker, a university student. Then the pattern solidified, chillingly specific. None of them had suffered a struggle. There was no forced entry, no blood, no ransoms demanded. Only their absence, startlingly complete. But there was the recurring detail that made my stomach clench. In every single case report, investigators noted an object left behind that was necessary for daily life, but placed with disturbing deliberation. Martha Klein, 1988. Keys left hanging on a specific hook, though she always kept them in her purse. David Holt, 1995. His wallet and ID placed centered on his kitchen table, empty of cash. Sarah Jensen, 2004. Her reading glasses, usually worn constantly, balanced perfectly on the open page of a book. It wasn't robbery or flight. It felt like a removal. Like someone cleaning up before they shut the door on the universe. I started taping the crime scene photos to the corkboard, trying to overlay the locations, the dates, searching for a temporal rhythm. The gaps between the disappearances were shrinking. Decades became years, years became months. Around 3 a.m., flipping through the newest file, Case 9, a local painter named Elias Thorne, vanished 3 weeks ago. I felt a cold pressure behind my eyes. Elias had left everything. His phone, his keys, his car in the driveway. His file's inventory report highlighted his final, deliberate act. A small, hand-drawn sketch found tacked to the door of his empty studio. Drawing depicts a dark, open archway. I leaned back in the creaking metal chair, rubbing my temples. I hated this job. It didn't deal with crime. It dealt with an unnatural vacancy. And then I noticed the faint sound above the hum of the ventilation. A soft, rhythmic scraping noise, like fingernails dragging across concrete, coming from the old stairwell that led up to the main floor. I froze, listening. The sound stopped. I looked back down at Elias Thorne's file, feeling the inexplicable urge to tidy the mess of paperwork on my desk. I reached for my travel mug, but my hand hesitated. I glanced down at my feet, expecting the comfortable scuff of my heavy work boots. They were gone. Instead, placed neatly side by side, centered directly beneath the chair I was sitting in, were my car keys and my ID badge. They gleamed faintly under the harsh fluorescent light, waiting. The archive suddenly felt very, very deep. I didn't dare move, didn't dare turn toward the stairwell. I was Case 09, file still open, and the silence that followed the scraping was the darkest thing I had ever known. Story 3. I remember when the first one was reported. Old Mr. Henderson, the quiet postman. We all figured he'd just wandered off. Perhaps a touch of early senility. Small town, you know. Things happen. But then came Sarah Jenkins, the high school art teacher, barely 30. Then the young couple, camping out by the old creek road. And suddenly, it wasn't just things happening. It was a pattern. A gaping, silent hole in our community. I'm a local journalist, or at least I try to be. My beat is usually county fairs and bake sales. But these cases, they became my obsession. I started digging. Each official report was a carbon copy. No struggle, no forced entry, no footprints leading away. Just an empty space where a person used to be. Their cars still in the driveway, coffee still brewing on the stove, phones left charging. It was as if they'd simply dissolved into the air, taking nothing but their own existence with them. The police were baffled. They had no leads, no suspects, just theories that dissolved under the slightest scrutiny. Serial killer? But there were no bodies. Human trafficking? No ransom notes, no digital footprint. It was too clean, too absolute. The missing were just gone. Our town, once so cozy, began to tighten. Neighbors eyed each other in the grocery store. The woods bordering the eastern edge, usually bustling with hikers and dog walkers, grew silent. A deep primal quiet settled over everything, like a pall. Every creak of the floorboards at night became a warning. Every shadow outside my window, a shape waiting to solidify. I started driving the old creek road after dark, the one where the campers vanished. The air out there was different, heavy, like breathing mud. I'd kill my engine, roll down the window, and just listen. Not for sounds, but for the absence of them. The crickets would stop. The wind would die. A profound stillness would descend, thick enough to touch, and in that silence, I'd feel it. A vast, cold emptiness that seemed to yearn for something more. Something else. One night my car stalled on that road. The dashboard lights flickered, then died. My phone, fully charged minutes before, was dead too. Panic seized me, cold and sharp. I sat there, heart hammering, staring out into the oppressive blackness, listening to my own ragged breathing. And then, through the silence, I heard it. A whisper, not a human voice, more like the rustle of dry leaves, but layered, deep, and impossibly close. It wasn't speaking words I understood, but the feeling it conveyed was crystal clear. "You're next." I scrambled out, heart threatening to burst, and ran. I ran until my lungs burned, until I collapsed on the asphalt miles away, shaking uncontrollably. My car was found the next morning, perfectly fine, battery fully charged. But I haven't been back to the creek road. I haven't driven alone at night. I watch the news now, not as a journalist, but as someone waiting for the next name. Because I know the truth, deep in my bones. It's not about who is taking them. It's about what is taking them. And it's still hungry. And it knows my name.